Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a Boeing 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. In this new series we are going to talk about the basics of flying on VATSIM, and I'm going to give you some instructions on the radio phraseology with the air traffic controllers. So stay tuned and here we go. Once you have signed up on VATSIM, you will have VATSIM ID and a VATSIM password. Those are going to be emailed to you and are the basics that you need to log into all the VATSIM services. So before we can actually start our flight, let's have a look at the VATSIM Learning Center. So on my.vatsim.net we have the Education Hub and the Learning Center down here, as well as some more information. Now, you are going to be familiarized with that by the time that you have completed your entry exam, but where I want to point you to before you actually start your flights here really is the Learning Center. And if we're in here, we can go on New Member Orientation course, and you should have done that anyway by the time you have completed your initial entry exams. But nonetheless, let's quickly have a look at it. So we go on New Member Orientation course and cover part 1, the basics. This is going to give you some basic information on how VATSIM works, and you are required to read this, and I can really recommend you to do it. The site is not all that long, so it doesn't require you too much time. This is basically giving you some basic information here. For example, what should your call sign look like when you are going to log in? Or how can you get help of a supervisor in case you get into trouble with an air traffic controller or with another pilot. So this consists of 4 parts over here that we have to go over. Now, the important thing here is this, the basic pilot expectations. And that is, you don't have to hold a type rating or anything to be able to use VATSIM. However, you have to be able to do a couple basic things. Let's comply with an air traffic control clearance and all issued instructions. Notify air traffic control without delay if unable to do or unsure of what a given instruction means. Holding a position on the ground when asked to stop at an airport. Flying an assigned airspeed. Flying at an assigned heading. And flying at an assigned altitude or flight level. It is also important that you are able to fly a direct to a waypoint, regardless if it is in your flight plan or not. But we are going to cover that at a later point in this new series. So, if the aircraft or automation is doing something undesired, VATSIM pilots are expected to intervene in the situation by reducing automation to a less complex mode like heading hold, altitude hold, vertical speed, etc. to fly the aircraft as required. Is the aircraft out of control? Disconnect the autopilot and hand fly the aircraft. Keep in mind, automation was created to reduce pilot workload, not to replace the pilot. Inform air traffic control of any problems promptly. Of course, that only concerns problems that air traffic control is actually concerned with. If, for example, your auto throttle disconnects, then, well, set thrust manually. And does ATC really need to know about that? Not really. But if your autopilot always wants to turn to an incorrect direction and you now have to hand fly the aircraft, that is something ATC may or should be informed about, because it will give you a less precision when flying the plane. And operate by the principle of aviate, fly the plane first, navigate, go where you need to go, and then communicate, including air traffic control, Unicom, etc. Now, Unicom, we are going to talk about that in a moment. Then, what shall you do if you need to leave your computer while you are flying online? You'll find this information here. What's important as well down here, where to connect to the network. Don't connect on runways or taxiways or on final approach to a runway. And over here they say don't connect nearby or inside of actively busy airspace or an online event. Personally, I would always recommend you, if you really need to connect in a busy airspace, just connect as an observer, send a private message to the controller, ask them if you can connect on the specified position where you currently are. And in many cases they're going to tell you, yeah, that is absolutely possible, or they may ask you to go offset a little bit, but that's really nothing to worry about. So we have a graphical illustration up here, like you can connect on parking positions at the terminals, but not on the runways or taxiways. Now, altimetry. That is something that you should be at least familiar enough with. Of course, read the full text over here, that's really important. But the most basic stuff here that you need to be familiar with is what is an altitude and what is a flight level. Altitudes are everything that is specified with the local QNH, so with the local altimeter setting, and is generally used at lower altitudes, so close to the terrain. For example, in Germany, altitudes are used up to 5,000 feet, and above that, flight levels are being used. The difference is, an altitude always comes with a QNH, and the flight level is always with the altimeter set to standard, so 2992 inches or 1013 hectopascals. Next up here is Unicom. Now, we are going to go into details about Unicom in a separate video, but generally when there is no air traffic controller online, then we have a frequency of 122.800, where pilots are expected to make reports to advise other nearby aircraft of what they are doing. Now, don't overdo it. Like, I often hear stuff like London traffic, speedbird 123, flight level 250, climbing flight level 300. Now, that is not of interest to other pilots. What is interesting for other pilots, and that is what's written down here, advise traffic of taxi and departure runway. So, when you are taxiing to a runway, advise traffic when taking off or landing on a runway. Like, for example, Air Berlin 123 taking off runway 32 right. Advise traffic near the airport of your approximate location and what your intended runway of landing is. Now, that of course, don't do it when you're too far out. The voice range on Unicom is 25 miles, so when you are close to the airport, then just make an announcement like Munich traffic, Air Berlin 123, 20 miles out for runway 25 left, or 26 left, for example. And any other operation that may impact nearby aircraft. So if you see somebody else on TCAS, then it might be a good idea, if it looks like you might be getting into conflict, to make a call out and announce your intentions. Flight plans. We will get to that in a moment. But what's most important for now is that you have to file a flight plan for every flight under instrument flight rules, and it is recommended to file a flight plan for flights under visual flight rules as well. Now in this channel we are going to cover the instrument flight rules, so a flight plan is always required for what we intend to do. Finally, we have the comments section in the flight plan remarks. So if you are just new to VATSIM, I would recommend you to put something like new pilot or newbie or something like that. That may give ATC some idea of what you know and what you may possibly not know. So let's go ahead with part 3. The role of the air traffic controller. So air traffic control is an aid to your flight, and they're going to direct your aircraft in a safe manner. The basic rule of air traffic control is to prevent aircraft collision by providing radar service. Only after that come efficiency, etc. So the basic rule is to prevent collisions while maintaining an orderly flow of traffic. Going ahead, we have the top-down concept. So let's have a look at the picture over here. Normally an IFR flight starts at the delivery controller and then goes forward to ground, tower, departure, en route sectors, then to the arrival controller, maybe to a director, and then again tower, ground, and that's it. However, on VATSIM you will find that often not all those stations are actually manned with controllers unless you're flying at big events, which by the way I would recommend you to do only after you have familiarized yourself and flown a little bit outside the peak traffic periods. So what would you do, for example, if tower, ground and delivery were not online but an approach controller is online? The answer is simple. Call the approach controller and he's going to take over everything of the stations that would be below him. So that's why it's called a top-down service. The next higher in terms of altitude controller is going to resume the duties of the controller below him. So an approach controller is going to cover, for example, delivery, ground and tower, or an area or center controller is going to cover approach, tower, ground and delivery. How do you find online air traffic control and know if you are located in controlled airspace? It is a very good idea to use the official VATSIM online map or use tools like, for example, VATSPY, which are providing information about which controllers are online. Now, do note that not all the time the correct areas of responsibility of a controller are shown on those maps, so it is a good idea to open your pilot client and have a look at the list of controllers that are online, and if you're in any doubt, just send the controller a private message and ask them if the airport you're at falls under his control. Now, talking over the radio and contacting ATC. I'll let you guys read this one, and I'm not going to comment on it just yet. We're going to talk over those in detail in the upcoming videos. Getting down here to the phonetic alphabet, that is actually something that you should be familiar with. So, in aviation, letters are not pronounced as letters, and numbers are not always pronounced by the plain English number that you are probably familiar with from school, or if you're a native speaker. So the phonetic alphabet, you'll just have to learn this one by heart, okay? So A means alpha, B is Bravo, C is Charlie, and so on. Now, that's something that you'll simply have to know. And by the way, talking about the numbers, we are using the numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 0. Note the number O is always pronounced as 0 in aviation, and the numbers 3 and 9 are slightly changed, so that normally you would say 3 and 9. However, since not all people from all areas in the world are able to pronounce the TH, and because the 9 can be confusing, for example, with the word nein, meaning no, those numbers have been changed, and 3 is officially pronounced as tri, and the number 9 has become niner, so with an ER behind it, so tri and niner. That is just to make things a little bit more clear and more understandable. So those you'll simply have to learn by heart. They are really basics, and you should understand them at all times. Going on then to part 4. So, in part 4 you have basically reached the end of the information section, and you will now have to conclude the new members orientation test, which is basically going to ask you for basics that we have just covered on the preceding pages. Once you have passed the new member orientation test, you will be awarded the P0 rating, and your account will be allowed to connect to the VATSIM network. Finally, if you happen to be a real-world pilot, then you can actually convert your pilot license to a VATSIM rating. So for example, if you hold a private pilot license, you can convert that to a VATSIM license. Now, is that important? Well, except for the P0 test, you don't have to pass any test or hold any license to be allowed to operate on VATSIM. However, these pilot ratings, as they're called on VATSIM, do give the controllers an idea of the level of knowledge of the pilot in question, so it may be helpful if you do hold a license to convert it. Well, I shouldn't say convert, because obviously your real license is not going to be influenced by it, but to upload your real license. It is not going to be visible in public to get awarded a pilot rating on VATSIM. Alright, this concludes our first look at the very basics. In the second video we are going to cover a little bit of basic radio phraseology, and I will give you some tips and tricks of where to start practicing those. So, thank you very much for listening. I hope you found this one useful. If you did, and if you really want to support the channel, there is a small donation link in the comments below. And I am always glad for these donations. They really are what keep this channel running. So, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to see you on the next video.